and thank you for joining us today for Overcoming Challenges to Educator Wellbeing. My name is Ashleigh Burn, and I'm the BU consultant for Victoria and Tasmania. I started working as a secondary English teacher and then went on to complete further study to become a guidance officer working in secondary schools in Queensland. With me today is Jen Berthold, the BU clinical lead for Victoria and Tasmania.
I'm a psychologist and I've been with the BU team for the last 4.5 years. I started my career as an educator in primary schools and then retrained as a psychologist about 15 years ago and have worked in private practice and headspace centres before coming to BU.
Thanks, Jen. So this session is appropriate for school educators and leaders taking a look at trends in ongoing and emerging challenges to staff wellbeing in current post-pandemic world context and exploring BU supports that empower educators and their learning communities to flourish. So before we begin today, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm meeting on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. Today we have people joining us from all over the country, so it would be wonderful if people could share their own acknowledgement by putting the name of the country that they're in the chat. So in today's session, we aim to provide a safe space to discuss information around personal wellbeing. As part of making our virtual safe space, please consider confidentiality and privacy throughout the sessions when using the chat box. We'd also love to hear from you throughout the session, so please feel free to participate through the chat and the polls that will be made available to you. The image that you see on the screen has contact details for Beyond Blue, Headspace, and a number of other services that you might find useful should you need to reach out for some external support. We acknowledge that each of us come to this session potentially juggling many different things, and we're all really busy. So we thank you for making the time to join this session and learn more about your wellbeing. We hope that you will come away from this session feeling empowered and try some new strategies, but also highlight the strategies that are probably already working really well for you. So for those of you who don't know about BU or haven't been to one of our virtual conferences before, BU is a national mental health initiative for educators and the organiser of this conference, led by Beyond Blue, in partnership with Early Childhood Australia and Headspace. BU is completely free and it's available to every educator, early learning service and school in Australia. BU aims to empower educators to support children and young people's social and emotional wellbeing and their own mental health. It aims to offer educators online professional learning, fact sheets, webinars, and other resources. We also offer communities tools and processes to implement a whole learning community approach to mental health and wellbeing. The discussions throughout this conference will highlight BU resources, tools, and professional learning to show you how BU can support a whole school and whole service approach to mental health. If you're interested in finding a bit more about BU, check out the website, which will be in the chat box. So in today's session, we're going to be covering the following things. Firstly, how educator wellbeing impacts student wellbeing. Then we're going to explore the trends in ongoing and emerging challenges to educator wellbeing. We will look at the BU Educator Wellbeing Guide, which is designed to empower a whole school approach to promote educator wellbeing, and then also look at the BU Educator Wellbeing resources to improve individual wellbeing in the post-pandemic world. So when looking at the impact of educator wellbeing on student wellbeing, it's really important to note that teachers play a crucial role in students' life. In fact, the research shows that, consistently shows that teachers are the most important in-school factor, contributing to student success, satisfaction, and achievement. As teachers, you're not only expected to teach students with academic skills, but you're also expected to teach skills that encompass social, emotional, and even ethical behaviours. So, levels of teachers' well-being may influence the effectiveness of teachers' ability to perform these various roles. So it goes without saying then that learner well-being is supported and strengthened by educator well-being. Student well-being is the other half of quality teaching, so it's important to create conditions for student and educator well-being. Building strong and supportive relationships with teachers allows students to feel safer and more secure in the school setting. And it's in this environment that students are more likely to connect with peers, feel more competent, and achieve better educational outcomes. So, why does educator wellbeing matter? Well, the expectations we currently have on teachers are complex. They're expected to perform new tasks, respond to students' individual differences, work collaboratively with parents, adapt to the new technological and digital demands, and the list probably goes on. But not only are the expectations of teachers rising, the working conditions and the classroom processes are also changing. Teachers are now reporting that they are overwhelmed and overloaded with non-teaching activities, especially administrative tasks. So it's in these working conditions that can lead to a stressful working environment, which affects teachers' motivation, their self-efficacy, and their job commitment. And when this happens, this impacts the educational system as a whole, including students' learning outcomes. So if teachers are stressed or burnt out, they're more likely that they're going to struggle to operate effectively in the classroom, and the quality of instruction is going to be impacted. So creating a healthy workplace for educators is a shared responsibility, and it goes beyond self-care. And a starting point, though, is looking at having a sense of self-awareness of where we sit on the continuum of mental health. So before we begin today, it's important that we have a shared understanding on what we mean by mental health. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential and can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. The range of experiences relating to mental health can sit along a continuum, and when we're looking at the mental health continuum, we can probably compare it to how we think about our physical health. So, for instance, we might recognize that we might have spent time across the range of physical health, and that this can be changeable, and this isn't unusual. So, the same goes with mental health. It's not fixed and it's not a static entity. It can also fluctuate according to a wide range of factors, and in the way that individuals experience these changes will look very different from each person. So when we look at the continuum of mental health, sometimes it can be helpful to ask ourselves questions like, how does it feel like? How does it look when I'm flourishing? How can I be more mindful of recognizing where I am on the mental health continuum? And what might I notice in myself if I am struggling? And using this continuum, when do I actually need to tap in to appropriate supports? So when looking at the ongoing and emerging challenges to educator wellbeing, there's some interesting data that has come out in a number of surveys and reports. So in 2018, the OECD's Teacher and Learning International Survey reported that approximately 3/4 of Australian educators said their job negatively impacted their mental health, which is huge. And then following on from that, in 2021, a survey of 571 educators across Australia, so it's 80%, said that their work-life balance was either less than ideal or non-existent. So Excessive workload for teachers is commonly being identified as a major factor to teachers' wellbeing. So it goes without saying then that teaching is probably one of the most stressful professions in the world. But as consultants, some of the other stresses that we are hearing from teachers include, but are not limited to, school systems becoming a bit more bureaucratic, expectations on teachers to manage difficult student behaviour, a lack of planning time, and fewer resources. But I'd love to do a poll now to see what you're currently experiencing. So I'd love for you to contribute your thoughts on the current challenges to educator wellbeing that you and your colleagues are facing. And it'd be really interesting to see if it is similar to what the research says and also what we are seeing as consultants.
Yeah. I might pop onto the next slide while we're waiting for those results to come through.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashleigh. So what trends are we seeing in schools? So we are seeing delays in student and social emotional learning, resulting in behaviour issues, conflicts not being resolved as easily amongst students, difficulties concentrating and focusing in the classroom. We are seeing changes in parent and carer behaviour. We're having more polarised behaviours, more parents at both ends, some more involved, anxious and demanding about their needs of their children, and others just exhausted and disconnected and ready to just hand over back to the school all responsibility. We're also seeing trends in staffing across the board, not just in education. There's been the great resignation where people, after being trapped at home during COVID, just wanting changes in life. And so people jumping ship and trying to find new careers. So that's resulted in us having an increase in less experienced leadership within schools, an increase in less experienced staff looking to leadership for guidance, and just less relief teachers available across the country when people call in sick and those relief teachers are needed, or when we want to send people off for training, there's not the staff there to fill in for them when they're not at school, which has really resulted in a lot of unfilled positions. And then also we're seeing across the board more staff and students becoming unwell because our immune systems kind of are having to kick back into gear following COVID now that we're back out in the world catching all the germs everybody has. We were in our little bubbles at home for a while, and now, our immune systems need to build back up. So we might jump back to the poll results now if we can. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. We're seeing a really high number of people putting into the poll that student behaviour is one of the challenges to educator wellbeing that a lot of people are encountering. The next highest one there.
Staffing shortages and then competing demands on time.
Yep. And wonderful. Thank you very much. So it's really good to see that, or helpful, I think, to see that we're all in this boat together. It's a stressful place to be, but you're not alone. Hopefully that's something you're getting from this. So it's common knowledge, it's well documented in the media that COVID-19 pandemic has been a disaster for communities across the world. And so looking at the phases of disaster and what we know about disaster recovery in communities is really helpful for us at this point. So probably all of us have moved through the honeymoon phase post the COVID-19 pandemic, where our wellbeing improved because we were excited about being able to get back out and travel and gather again in our communities. And then possibly we're finding ourselves in that space of disillusionment, or, down at the bottom of the trough, or hopefully starting to work back up through the grief about, what we've missed out on over the last few years. We may, a lot of people talk about, let's just get back to normal. Where were we with our wellbeing pre-disaster? And that's great. It would be great if we can get back there, but it would be even better if we can create a new normal that brings our well-being up better than it was before the pandemic, and that would be post-traumatic growth. So post-traumatic growth occurs when our reconstructed new normal is at a higher level of flourishing than our pre-disaster level, or our pre-disaster position on the mental health continuum that Ashleigh showed us earlier. And a large body of research shows that when we go through traumatic events, epigenetic changes can be triggered and they can be passed on to future generations. That's one of the ways that we pass on intergenerational trauma. But there is a growing body of research that shows that changing our mindsets and our behavioural habits can reverse these trauma-triggered epigenetic changes and prevent further intergenerational transmission of trauma impacts. So if we can reconstruct this new normal that is post-traumatic growth for each of us as individuals and for our communities, where that post-traumatic growth means that we've discovered through this disaster that we can lean on our support networks, that we can come together as communities, that our support systems work, and that we individually do have the resilience to come back from things that were really difficult. That way of thinking, that real strong core belief that, we can get through tough things together is what we're talking about when we talk about post-traumatic growth. Some of the things that really contribute to that post-traumatic growth include interconnectedness, interconnected wellbeing, and we're going to have a look at what that means for our communities. So the human limbic system allows us to feel the emotions of people we perceive as similar to us. So if you're watching a movie and you're feeling the emotions of the characters, it's probably because they remind you of yourself or someone close to you. And in the past, this meant that when a predator attacked our flock, our fight or flight response could get us to safety, even without having witnessed the threat ourselves. But what that means in our school communities is that colleagues and students pick up how we are feeling, even if we would rather that they didn't. And they share our emotions. When we feel stressed, they feel stressed. When we feel calm, we can help others to feel calm. So your individual wellbeing, as Ashleigh shared earlier, is really interdependent on the wellbeing of your colleagues, and as previously identified, student wellbeing is interdependent on your wellbeing. So as a result, educator wellbeing has to be planned for at a whole school level. It's not something that an individual can really do on their own. So we're really going to be talking about some of the ways that BU can support your school to empower a whole school approach to promoting educator wellbeing. Each learning community is at a different point in their cycle of continuous improvement relating to educator wellbeing. Some schools already have a plan in place and are reviewing their progress and implementing further strategies. Some schools have lots of good things happening that promote educator wellbeing, but they haven't really taken stock of them, recorded them into a plan, and taken steps to ensure that cycle of continuous improvement happens into the future. We're going to skip now. The BU Educator Wellbeing Guide is something that's recently been released on the BU website, and your BU consultant can support your school leadership teams to begin to use this resource to take a planned whole school approach to promoting educator wellbeing. A whole school approach needs to start with gathering information about about existing strengths and opportunities for growth. And educators need to have voice and choice in the development of any whole school approach to educator wellbeing. It needs to be a joint effort. All right, we are now going to skip across to speak to Lisa Jorge.
Yes. So I would like to welcome Lisa Jorge, the Deputy Principal from St. Francis of Assisi Primary School in Tarneet, Victoria. So, no worries. Thank you for coming, Lisa. So, Lisa, would you tell us a bit about yourself and why you've chosen to join us today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Deputy Principal, as you mentioned, at St. Francis of Assisi in Tarneet. And I feel very lucky to be able to come here. I've worked with BU previously and had an amazing experience. And I'd love to be able to come and share that with people. And hopefully you're able to take away some of the things that our school is currently doing or hoping to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. So I'd like to start off with probably acknowledging what challenges to educator wellbeing have you noticed at your school?
I think this is something that probably we've all noticed, and it's time. It's finding the time to be able to address this and acknowledge this. Schools have competing priorities, and there is always something that we need to do, and finding the time, I think, is really important. It shows our staff that we obviously do really care about it in amongst everything else that is required of us as educators. For us, it was also identifying what our starting point is for our staff. So knowing that people are coming on this journey at different points. There are people that work together as we are a school, working in teams. Some of them know each other, some of them are new to each other. So understanding where we were at a school and what our starting point was.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Like, you need to acknowledge where you're at so you know how far you've got to go, or to be able to make practical steps to actually implement a whole school approach.
Yeah, that's true. And we also had to understand not each of our staff, but knowing that our staff are all at different stages of understanding their own well-being and self-awareness as well.
So how have you started your whole school approach to educator wellbeing?
So we decided to dedicate a day at the end of term 1 to this. So we looked at rolling out the BU plan for educators. And for that, what we did is we worked really closely with our consultant in the BU team. And we wanted it to be around self-awareness and then also understanding each other on it as our team. So we worked through the BU plan, and that helped us plan a whole day where staff got to know each other better. And then we moved into team activities, and it really it really emphasised where we wanted to go and where our school was planning to go for the rest of the year.
And did you get some good feedback from staff during that process of, you know, how they were feeling and what they wanted to see more of?
Yeah, we got a great response from our staff, both on the day, throughout the holidays, and also when we came back to school. We've opened it up to staff and asked them what they'd like to see moving forward. And it's been great to hear the responses, and great that staff are already taking things on themselves. So understanding it doesn't just lie with us as leaders, that it is, as we say, a whole school approach and something that, you know, we all can take charge in.
Down. Yeah, definitely. So looking at BU, how did your BU consultant support your whole school approach, you know, during this process?
Sure. So I was really lucky to meet my BU consultant at the beginning of this year, and her name is Jessie. And once we decided as a school that this was what we wanted to do with our day, I connected with Jessie. We had various Zoom meetings. And I just said to Jessie, this is what our plan is. Where can you take us? And Jessie was amazing. She was amazing in her emails, her phone calls. There is, as you know, an amazing amount of resources on your website. And I think for us as educators, it's understanding where exactly to go to. So Jessie was amazing in saying, okay, this is your focus for the day. Have a look at these resources, as well as saying, okay, moving forward, here are some resources that you can continue to share with your staff, your students, as well as your community, for them to understand where you're going with this as a whole school approach. As well as that, Jessie also helped us afterwards check in with how we went on the day. And we've created a plan as a school of where we would like to go moving forward. We were really clear that we didn't want this to just to be a one-off day for staff, that we really wanted to make sure that we saw out the whole year, but also then moving into the future. So Jessie's been great in saying, okay, we've started off with this day, where are we going to go after this?
Amazing. So the staff can see it's actually a priority, and that there's some progress moving forward. I think you made a really interesting point there as well about the consultant helping you find and navigate the suite of resources that are available, because like you were saying before, schools are so busy and you have competing priorities. So just having that time and having someone there to point you to where the resources are so that you can take them, use them as you will, sounds really helpful.
Yeah, and I think the other thing was, because it is evidence-based and research-based, that makes a really big difference. We don't have the education in that, so to know that what we're sharing with staff obviously is really valid, it is up-to-date research, was really helpful.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm going to pass it
still
on
there's
to
another
Job. Is there?
question as
Okay,
well.
sorry about that. So,
Our slides are a little bit out of
yes.
whack. Sorry, we'll continue. Yeah.
So what resources in particular assisted your whole school approach to educator wellbeing?
So we started the day with our BU Wellbeing Plan for Educators, and that really framed our day. So we used that throughout the day. We'd start with a little bit of evidence-based information, then we'd go through part of the plan. Our teams shared their experiences or their responses, and then we kept doing that throughout the plan for the day. So that was really an important part of our day. So that really framed our day. We used a lot of evidence-based articles that Jessie sent us that was on the BU website. There was a great infographic and poster that helped staff that we could use again further on from that day, where staff could go to, or staff could find support if they or someone in their team needed that support. And then also the links to the other resources that were out there. There was the Black Dog Institute, as well as Headspace, Beyond Blue. So just the website is amazing, you know, and just taking the time to go through it and see what's out there, I think is really important.
And I think it's true. There is so much evidence-based and amazing resources available, and it's not about reinventing the wheel, isn't it? It's just about knowing where to go and how you can make use of what's already there, which is great. It sounds like your school's done a really great job at doing that. So what advice would you like to offer other schools wanting to begin a whole school approach to educator wellbeing?
So I think always whenever we start the whole school approach, we need leadership to be on board. And that's where I think we're really lucky at our school. Our leaders are really on board. We understand that a whole school approach is whole school. It's not just our teachers, it's our learning support staff, it's our admin staff, it's our maintenance staff. So we involved everyone on this day. And it's something we've been able to reflect on since that day, which has been lovely. We've shared a few laughs. I think the other really important thing, we touched on this before, is asking for staff input and feedback.
Yes.
We have, within our school, we have 50 staff members. There is a range and a wealth of knowledge out there. And sometimes I think we believe that it lies with the leaders to start things. It is not the case. I had staff who emailed me over the holidays. They made posters. They laminated them, put them up on our staff toilet doors. We've got displays that are going up in the school. People have given us ideas of little activities that we can do as a school, really short, sharp activities that, again, throughout the year show that we really care, and, you know, we need that staff wellbeing to be at that level for us to be able to be the best educators for our students.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like this day has really like mobilized the expertise that, you know, is in your school and really improving morale as well.
Yeah, no, it's been great. We're very, very lucky.
Did we want to jump to the Q&A? Were there any questions for Lisa?
So did you use any survey or other tools to see the baseline of staff wellbeing?
Jessie has pointed us to the survey. We're actually rolling that out this term. So for us, we had quite a short timeline to be able to get our day ready. So for us, it was the wellbeing plan that guided our day. But now that we've done that, our plan is this term to use the survey to then see where we can move to next from this.
That would be amazing. So there was one before. This one's a good one. How did you overcome any leadership challenges? For example, if leadership didn't agree that mental health and wellbeing was a priority, how did you get past that?
Luckily, I'll be honest with you, that really wasn't an issue for us. Again, we did come back to that issue of time, and we mapped out our year and we looked at, during our professional learning days, what they would look like. And as a team, again, I think we were really lucky in our leaders acknowledging we are coming out of a post-pandemic world. We are in an incredibly stressful job. And if we are not flourishing, then we can't give fully of ourselves to our whole community, because as you know, it's not just about the children in our environment, it is also about our families. So it's so much more than that.
And we will come back around to talk next about just educator wellbeing for individuals who are here who maybe don't have that leadership support to have a whole school approach. Yeah.
Another good question too is, does this cost schools anything to set up?
We did not pay a cent. And I think that's what's so amazing about BU. Absolutely nothing. So we were very, very lucky. All that we paid for as a school is we just did some activities with our staff, but to roll out anything from BU, all of that was free, which is amazing.
Yeah. And like you said before too, it is evidence-based. There is so much there. It's just about knowing where to get it and how to use it. And as the consultant, we're not there to tell you how to do your job. It's just more of a sounding board to be like, this is kind of what you could do, take with it as you will, and tailor it to your specific context and your setting.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Pass it on to Jen now.
So as Lisa was speaking, we've seen a couple of slides about Educator Wellbeing tools on the BU website. So there is a whole wellbeing page for you, for educators. And on that, there are links to all sorts of different evidence-based apps and resources that are not BU resources that are available out there for your wellbeing. Additionally, the BU Educator Wellbeing Plan for educators is something that you as an individual can take and work on yourself, or you could invite one or two of your colleagues to sit down with you and work on theirs as well and share them with one another. So Lisa mentioned that it was used within their whole school Educator Wellbeing Day. But what's within that plan are prompts for you to reflect on your own self-care, things like self-awareness. You know, where do you carry, or what are the signs for you, maybe in your body or your physiology, or maybe in your thought processes that indicate to you that maybe you're getting a bit wobbly or that you're getting towards that struggling end of the continuum. It also prompts you to think about, what are your strengths? What are those things that you're good at in your role as an educator, that where you really get into a sense of flow, where you lose track of time because you're just really in there doing your job and enjoying it. Maybe it's when you're working with students, maybe it's when you're marking essays. It's, you know, where is that for you? And putting those strengths down and then thinking about where you can celebrate those. You know, give yourself a little pat on the back, or say to your colleague, oh, I had a great buzz when I was doing that activity with my class. And then how you can increase the amount of time that you're feeling that at work by finding those moments to do more of that. Also within there are things like really reflecting on who are your support people, who you can go to when you're feeling a bit wobbly and say, hey, I'm having a bit of a rough patch here. Can we have a cup of tea or a chat or go for a walk around the oval? You know, what all are those strategies you can access at work while, you know, you're in between lessons, while the kids are working, or in those small moments that recharge you or help you regroup when you're a bit wobbly. So that Educator Wellbeing Plan is great for an individual to use. Even better if you can find a buddy on your team that you can both do it and then share that with one another around what you can do to support me and what I can do to support you. Even better if there's a whole school day to work on that together, but not necessary. It can be used by just an individual or a few people together. So, that very much within that plan, there is that breaks down self-care into these three spaces. So that's self-awareness of your body talk or your habits of thought. Some of you may have heard of unhelpful thinking styles. So when you're getting into very negative thought patterns around everyone's out to get me, or, you know, everything's really hard, or the body talk, like do you hold it in the tension of your jaw, or do you find yourself holding your arms folded more when you're getting a bit defensive? And then what are those strategies? They might be little mantras like keep calm and carry on, or everybody has their own, or it might be 3 deep breaths or something else that helps you. And then really thinking about, you know, as educators, we're really good at giving support to others. It can be really hard to ask for help, and it can be even harder to accept it when it's offered. So just thinking about, you know, how graceful are you at accepting help, and how do you communicate to others what actually is helpful for you? Wonderful. So, you know, we have talked a bit about what strengths you bring to your work. What skills do you engage in routinely where you get into that sense of flow? And where do you find meaning in your work? Why did you choose to get into this role in the first place? When we get into the bunkers, through COVID, we were really, really pivoting and working hard to just keep up and keep our kids engaged and work out how to do our job. But really, when you take a moment to be able to step out of that and look back and reflect, why did you get into this in the first place, and where can you reconnect with that meaning again in your work? Do you want to write that down and put it up, on the wall in your classroom, or stick it on your desk somewhere in a little picture frame to remind you why you're there? And it might be a picture or it might be words, but just something to remind you in those tough moments that you're here for a reason. And then also, where do you get a sense of accomplishment? How do you track your success? Is it just tied up in NAPLAN scores? Are there other things that help you to measure your success? Is it those moments when you see, that click over of, oh, I understand a new concept in a student in your class? Or when little Johnny comes in looking really glum and then, your welcome into the classroom brings a smile to his face? Or when you see that little withdrawn child that didn't really have too many friends and you've done a lot of work to help them learn some social skills and build a connection with others, and you see them walking out into the playground arm in arm with a few other students. What are those little goals you're setting yourself that you can then go, yes, I've done that. I contributed to that. I made that happen. And how do you give yourself a pat on the back or share that little sense of celebration with your colleagues? All really important things in building your well-being. And these are things that you can do yourself, or, yourself and a buddy, that you don't require the whole school to be on board with. But if you can get that whole school thing happening, that's great. Spread the movement, encourage others to join in. So we are going to go to the live Q&A now before we jump to this bit. I think I've missed possibly, hang on. I would love to hear from the live Q&A where you're finding enjoyment at work. Love that.
Yeah.
Comes back from a sense of purpose
and acknowledging that you make a difference. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Seeing students show agency in the learning and showing pride in their accomplishments.
Yeah.
There's nothing better.
Yeah, that's lovely. I'm going to put you on the spot, Lisa. Could
Yes.
you share maybe that, how people in your school maybe share that sense of purpose and is that something that you've done yet or might do at your school?
Not yet, but that's definitely, a next step for us. I just had something where we asked our staff, what do you, what's your sense of purpose when you come to school? And some people said, well, for me, it's interacting with others and connecting with others. And we simply spoke about, we simply spoke about something we take for granted, I think, every morning at school, where when we walk in the door, everyone says hello to each other. And they said for some of us who live at home, that's the first hello, the first verbal hello they get in the morning. So that connection, not only with each other, but with our students and with our families as well.
And how important it is to, particularly when it's taken away from us for such a long period of time, to be able to readjust to getting that back is great.
Definitely. Some of the other things we're seeing popping up, connecting with students and empowering them to find solutions, seeing students enjoying their learning, the sense of community, connection with colleagues. Yeah, a lot of the same things popping up there. Thank you so much.
Relationships, community, connection,
meaning,
which
purpose.
is all, part of such an important part of our well-being.
Very much so. So then we're coming closer to the end, but we would love if there were, no, let's just go to this part. Really challenge you to think about, this changing habits. Sometimes we want to change the world. Sometimes we want to, really have huge impacts across our school. And sometimes trying to make big changes unsustainable, but you can change one habit. If you can change one habit, build it into practice, and then next week make another little change to your habits, and each week shift your habits and the habits of the people around you by the ripple effects, it can be really powerful. So leading a whole school approach to educator wellbeing in your school may or may not be within your locus of control, but it's certainly within your sphere of influence to make small changes towards that whole school educator wellbeing. It's much easier to make one small change at a time rather than try to get that big change off the ground. And every small change of habit that you make has that ripple effect amongst your students, your colleagues, your family and your friends. So something else that we know from the research is that if you say something out loud or write it down, you're more likely to follow through with it. So we're really inviting all of you to write in the chat one change of habit that you might make to improve educator wellbeing in your school community. Just one small thing that you might do. Maybe you're going to go and have a look at the educator wellbeing plan. Maybe you're going to go and fill it out. Maybe you're going to go and share it with someone else. Maybe you're just going to stop and take those 3 deep breaths, every now and then through your workday. Yeah, we'd love to go to the Q&A and just see what small changes you're thinking you might take in your
boundaries. Have a lunch break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An important one.
That is such a big one. I think, not having lunch breaks, boundaries, boundaries, around even like emails and when you stop working at night time.
Trying not to take work home, like to a certain extent, having a moment during, a time at which you turn off from work and think about recharging your batteries or connecting with your family or your pet or just, unwinding and letting work go for the
Going
evening.
for a walk outside the school building for at least 10 minutes, yes.
Yeah. Pause and breathe. Certainly that providing opportunities to people to give you a little bit of thanks and accepting it gracefully, or sharing with them what you're doing so they have the opportunity to thank you. Yeah, trying to focus on and reinforce the positive things that are happening. Yep, just carving out those little gratitude moments in your day.
Yeah, particularly when things are feeling very overwhelming, to stop and pause and think, okay, it's not all bad, but what are some things I can control, and things that are going well can be really helpful and make you more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure to acknowledge achievements, that is really, really important.
I love this one, to a clear finish time on Fridays.
Definitely on Fridays. Yeah. Don't let it creep into Saturday. Yeah, absolutely. And some of that can be making time to thank your colleague or point out to your colleague some of their little achievements too. If you start doing that, you'll start to receive what you're putting out.
Yes, definitely. Because I think when we are overwhelmed and we're feeling overloaded, we're just thinking, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And not really taking stock of how far we've come or how much we're actually doing. So,
and it is really easy to get task focused and forget about the importance of the relationship.
So by doing that to other people, it makes you maybe stop and think, okay, what am I doing as well? So
might circle back. Hadn't planned to talk about this, but boundaries are really important in how we assert them. So, just being able to really politely say to somebody who might need you to do something right now that, thank you for coming to me about that, and it's definitely important to me, and right now I need to just do this, so can we come back to that a bit later, to make sure that you do get your toilet break and your cup of tea when you need it and you don't get hijacked in the hallway to do something else. Or telling a young person in your care that I really care about you, and the playground teacher, the playground duty teachers over there, could you go talk to them or come and see me after recess? I actually need to just go and do this now, but you're very important to me and I will come back to you about that.
It's that modelling too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Modelling that to someone, right now may not be the right time for me, but I care about that, we'll circle back to it.
That's right.
Definitely.
Yeah. Beautiful. So please do, if you're in a leadership position or you can get your leadership on board, register your whole community with BU. We encourage you to keep up to date with the resources and the events coming up, and get onto our social media channels as well to be alerted when those things are coming up. If you're looking for resources to support your school, the link back to those educator wellbeing resources and the BU website should be in the discussion forum for you. And there will be more events coming up online. So thank you so much for attending our session today, and we hope many of you will join Ashleigh and I for the panel discussion later on today. Thanks so much, Lisa, for coming.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.